divisional participation in library reorganization. And these processes have been occurring at most, if not all, campuses, and are been great change in most of the things we do. So really, the catalyst for this was the Spring Assembly event at UC Davis, where this was a topic of one of the sessions, and apparently it was very well received and well attended. So Michelle Potter actually acted as our inspiration to do this here. She was pretty ecstatic about, you know, how successful that particular session was at the Spring Assembly. So today we've assembled speakers from, as you can see, Riverside, San Diego, Santa Barbara, and Irvine to talk about their experiences in their reorgs and or major changes that they've experienced in the last couple of years or so. So now Anthony Sanchez will be our moderator and timekeeper. So basically everyone has 5 to 10 minutes to chat about their experiences and their perceptions of what's been going on at their campuses. And so we'll go through everyone's talks, and please hold your questions until part 2, which is a panel discussion that we'll have. That's when questions and answers will be happening. Okay, so I do have a few introductory remarks thinking about this whole process, and I should probably introduce myself. So again, thanks for coming. I think this event's probably going to be pretty informative and probably pretty lively as well, and that's good. That's some real discourse. So thanks to Mitchel Brown and for bringing the recording equipment, and Shu for helping Mitchell, thank you, record the event. So all of this will be canned and put onto a live LAUC site shortly. Okay, thanks to Christina Cicchetti, Chair of the Programs Committee, for doing a lot of the logistics to make this happen. And again, thanks to Michelle Potter, really, for the inspiration to do this. So my name is Steve Mitchell. I'm a science reference librarian here, a distinguished librarian, and a 28-year veteran of UC Libraries. I'm one of the founders of InfoLine, which is one of the first web-based services offered by a library in the United States. It's been going 20 years. We're in its 20th year right now. I was a grant project director for about a decade on advanced tech projects, including those of IDEA and data fountains, software systems featuring semi-automated metadata generation and focus crawling, among other things. Our projects worked with NSF's National Science Digital Library, and CDL, Emory University, Cornell, and many others, and received 4 IMLS National Leadership Grants in the process of pursuing the work. All right, LAUC, to me, LAUC is meant to be an organization where all UC librarians, both line and management, are given a forum where we can get together to dialogue about and critically and objectively assess major ongoing activities, as well as propose changes to our libraries and services and to staffing, work roles, workload, training, and other issues that affect us in our patronage. This is important given that the reorgs and planning going on now explicitly promise to change life as we know it. For all librarians and staff, students, and researchers, the foundations for major consolidations, system-wide, are in the works. Much of this could be good. However, in many libraries, librarians retire and their positions are not replaced, and if replaced, are increasingly replaced by non-librarians, often doing librarian work. New positions are created for non-librarian positions, which could actually be done by librarians trained in the proper way. What does it all mean for the health of our profession, our morale, and service to our patronage? These are serious matters that LAUC squarely has a responsibility for objectively assessing and dealing with. The health of the librarian profession during the changes must become a higher priority to LAUC, in my estimation. LAUC as an organization can and should be playing a much more active and critical role in planning activities, given the extent to which they will affect the profession in the UC. After all, the assembled membership represents a huge knowledge base of best new and traditional practices and services of value to our clientele. And yet we have found that planning on some campuses has been fairly opaque and closely held, with few outside of high-level management being allowed or encouraged to participate in meaningful ways. The inclusion activities undertaken have often been mostly symbolic. On some campuses, we appear to have functioning management planning silos. And you know how we all want to break down silos. That's actually a good thing in most situations. The result has been some big fumbles here and there, as we will hear, many of which might have been avoided if communication had been more transparent. This event then builds on the Davis event to bring more light and critical reflection on the process of reorg and strategic planning, and to encourage much better communication among the parties involved to produce the best possible outcome for all. Fiat loops. So at this point, I would like to introduce our moderator, Anthony. As you can see, these are our participants today. Anthony is instruction coordinator at Rivera Library. His subjects include English literature, film, mass media, theater. And he'll be our incoming secretary for LAUC in 2014-15. And he's worked previously at the Maricopa Community Colleges. So let's give Anthony a hand, and Anthony will introduce
Okay, thank you everyone for coming today. This should prove to be a great discussion. I want to just introduce our panel speakers today. First I'll start with Rhonda Neugebauer. Rhonda is the incoming LAUC Art Chair and UCR Bibliographer for Latin American, Iberian, and Chicano Latino Studies at UC Riverside. She is the UCR campus representative for scholarly communication, and since 1983 she has worked in 4 academic libraries. For 2 years she has served as the chair of the Librarians Caucus in the UCAFT Local 1966 for librarians and lecturers. She is part of a new era of local union participation and co-governance in campus life, having been invited to meet, along with all unions, with Chancellor Kim A. Wilcox on 2 occasions as the UCAFT representative for librarians. She will give remarks today on the critical work that UCR librarians have done to support strategic planning in the context of the reorganization of the UCR libraries, which planned and upcoming. Next is David Schmidt. David Schmidt is the engineering liaison librarian, and since the reorg, also the collection coordinator for physical sciences and engineering. He was the chair of LAUC SD in the 2012-2013 year, which included the bulk of the reorganization activities at UC San Diego. Cristela Garcia-Spitz is the Digital Library Development Project Manager at the UC San Diego Library. She served as the co-chair of the Climate Goal Implementation Team during the library's reorganization. Alan Grossenheider serves as the Deputy University Librarian at the University of California State, Santa Barbara. He has the primary responsibility for organizational development and effectiveness, with authority for assessment, planning, budget, human resources, and training, and has oversight for all operations. And finally, Mitchel Brown is the research librarian for chemistry, earth systems science, and Russian studies, and scholarly communications coordinator at UC Irvine since 2005. In his role as scholarly communications coordinator, Mitchel has worked with faculty to implement the UC Open Access policy for depositing current research publications to e-scholarship. He is co-chair, along with Nancy Stimson, of the Scholarly Publishing CKG, and is the SP CKG liaison to the UC Office of Scholarly Communications Committee. He has served as LAUC President 2011-2012 and LAUC Irvine Chair 2009-2010. His education background includes a BS in Physics from Carnegie Mellon and an MLIS from the University of Texas, Austin. Previous to UC Irvine, Mitchell worked at Princeton University and LSU Baton Rouge. Let's give a round of applause for our panel. Also, David Okay, so let's begin with our introductions to our individual panelists. We'll start with Rhonda Neugebauer.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for this opportunity to speak today, and thank all of you. I thank all of you for coming so far, and also the local people. This meeting exemplifies the best practices of library associations, bravely defending the rights of and ensuring protections for librarians, represented and not represented. I have the honor of being LAUC, our incoming chair this year, while also continuing as chair of the Librarians Caucus, which is the union. My role in both organizations is to seek clarity of purpose and to advance work that highlights and empowers librarians and provides for their collective contributions. Of course, empowerment is really the key to understanding and advocating for change that improves the entire library organization. Today, many others will share their thoughts on the concept of empowerment of line librarians that benefit the library. The draft University Library Strategic Plan for UCR was released on February 7th this year, and envisioned a library environment vastly different from today. The re-envisioned library unit not only raises its own revenues through outside funding, but also seeks to offer increasingly robust and distributed library services in research, instruction, campus outreach, and subject liaison work. Further, promotional, marketing, and branding activities, as well as technological advances, are concurrently transforming librarian roles and duties to match a myriad of new priorities and approaches. There are several important concepts envisioned in the strategic plan draft, such as, quote, empower positive change by bringing together diverse individuals and communities, unquote. Transformation of libraries can and should include improvements in services and collections, and most likely, new duties, roles, and functions for librarians. However, changes that involve individual librarians with the Represented Librarians Union, changes that involve individual librarians or librarians as a class of employees require notification of and possibly bargaining with the Represented Librarians Union, the UCSD. We did have to point this out, and when we did, we were able to join with management to hold labor management meetings in order to discuss the planning and its impact on librarians are expected to carry out this new strategic plan. And we have now held two library administration and labor relations meetings. We expressed the desires of our members, who are both LAUC members as well as UCAFT members, to improve communication, inclusion, and accountability at all levels of the library. Our first recommendation was simple, that the next steps in the reorg demonstrate an increased inclusivity as the plan is reworked and edited to respond to the campus input. The campus input was due March 7th. Luckily, at the UCR campus level, our Chancellor Wilcox, has reaffirmed that unions provide a unique voice on the campus and create a space that should be protected where members can give input, propose solutions, and engage with campus policies and personnel. We agree and continue to meet periodically with the Chancellor and the 7 unions on the UCR campus. Oh, and by the way, the Chancellor's dad was Teamster, and his mother was a union organizer. I think it had an impact. The February release of the draft strategic plan process, as well as the content in the strategic plan report, lacked any significant input, perspective, or ideas from represented librarians until May 22nd, when we held our first labor management meeting about the strategic plan. Our goals at the first labor management meeting were clearly communicate that because the terms and condition of employment may be affected, we would like to have demonstrable, continuous, and collective input on the strategic plan, as well as the implementation process of transforming the libraries. Next, I'll discuss the changed work conditions and terms of employment, and I must stress, we've discussed the draft strategic plan in both LAUC Division here in Riverside and at union meetings. The critiques and concerns voiced by these two groups, LAUC and UCAFT, groups in which UCR librarians hold dual membership, are very much shared and mutually reinforced. The working conditions that we've identified as impacted or affected as a result of the proposed transformations include new and altered work roles and duties, training and retraining needs associated with those new and altered work roles and duties, new reporting lines and increasingly complex reporting structures and merit reviews. For workload, as positions have been vacated and not filled or filled with temp librarians, workload has increased with an expectation that the remaining workers absorb those duties. Similarly, as we explore new roles and services, our traditional workload will remain mostly intact. Collection development, university service, departmental duties, those kind of things. So with only 32 librarians in UCR, we continue to raise the collective, even if dwindling voice of the line librarian. Those UCR librarian numbers include, of the 32, 11 of those people are managers, 5 AULs and a UL, and 6 mid-level managers. That's like 1 manager for every 2 librarians. Worker morale. The scale of changes proposed in our library's reorg likely will impact every library employee, every job, and every reporting line. These changes have the potential to lower morale, and as we know from the literature, morale is affected by lack of acknowledgement and lack of transparency, lack of inclusion, fear that your job may be in jeopardy if you express a critical thought, or fear of being singled out for supporting the union position or even supporting the union taking a position. Lastly, I just want to say, is this a reorg? Here locally, we've discerned that the strategic plan is the first step in a reorg. However, if nothing else, the plan proposes several large technical, service, infrastructure, managerial, and personnel changes that will without question require, much like the scale of planning at UCSD, a thorough reorganization of the library structure. Our hope is that through union involvement and attentiveness to these issues, UCR can avoid disabling developments and low morale while helping local managers make the strategic plan a success. There have been no real discussion of empowering the many good librarians and staff we have at UCR. Without genuine inclusiveness and collegiality, there can be no empowerment. We need strategic planning led by managers and visionaries who respect knowledge, craft, as well as the accomplishments of all librarians. These are the best practices that we want to support. Thank you.
Okay. Dave, do you want to come?
Actually, so I was going to start off for UCSD. And
Okay.
We'll go back and forth a little bit.
Who's making juices?
Well, thank you for having us here today. We are missing one individual. Roger Smith also presented with us at the LAUC Assembly, but he had other commitments today. But we do have Gayatri with us as well, and so Gayatri was a part of the climate quality implementation team and can also speak about the reorganization. So I'm going to try to give a little bit, just a basic overview of the reorganization, and then I'll pass it to Dave to talk a little bit about LAUC-SD's involvement. And then he'll pass it back to me so I can talk a little bit about climate qual, which is something that was happening concurrently as the reorganization was going on. So the need to reorganize was based on changes made necessary by budget cuts over the period of 2008 through 2012. Including library closures. We had 4 branch libraries close, our medical center, CLICS, which is our research commons, our international relations and Pacific studies, and our Scripps Institute of Oceanography library, along with a significant reduction in staff. So we went from 289 down to 239, and this was completely by attrition. So when there were retirements and people moving to other positions, we didn't have to lay off. But that was 50 less people in the library. And as Rhonda was talking about, then that means everyone else was taking on that workload. In addition, there were changes in library use trends and noted the steady decline of the use of traditional materials and services and the preference for electronic and remote services. The physical library space continues to be used, but used in many new and different ways. So the reorganization was intended to position our resources to better meet the challenges of this new environment. So this is the org chart from 2012, and at this point we were the UCSD libraries, and there were several subject-based branch libraries. And we also had 4 associate university librarians. And basically our structure was very department-based. And then this is our organizational chart in 2014. And we now are the UC San Diego Library, so we've been rebranded and we are now one library. And we also had one of our associate university librarians retire, and so we have remained with 3. And we've now taken on a more functional program-based structure. So the reorganization was done in phases over 2012 to 2013 and finalized roughly in August of 2013. And I'll stress the roughly because there's still a lot of transition going on. And our library emerged from the restructuring organized around functional programs, doing away with the subject library distinctions, and assigning librarians and staff programs on functional levels. So this resulted in a number of librarians being split between functions, generally between 2 to 3 programs, especially for a lot of our public services side. And so this has been one of the most difficult aspects of the reorganization transition, with implications on workload, supervision, and reviews. And Dave will get a little more into that at some soon. And then I was just going to make one more brief note. Okay, so in March of this year, we did do an intensive transition status check, which comprised of individual surveys. People were able to respond individually about the transition. And then also within the programs, we all had a set of questions and met within our programs to discuss what had happened over the reorg. And then we also did a town hall dedicated to just synthesizing this feedback and considering, where we were and where we needed to go. So that feedback has coalesced around 5 top priorities for action or items for concern. So one of the major ones being split assignments between programs. A lot has gone into the needing to clarify roles and responsibilities and decision-making across the different programs. Staff morale, again, as Ron sort of mentioned, it was perfect that morale has been a big challenge through the process. Workload and understaffing, and then also our administrative support model, which has been difficult. The way our administrative assistants report to different programs is something we're also looking to work on. So work on each of these is underway. So with that, I'll pass it to Dave.
So the big question being, what did LAUC do, and how were they consulted, how were we consulted, and the answer is probably not a lot. The way the LAUC at our campus interacts, we have a quarterly chairs meeting, which includes the current chair and the past chair and the incoming chair, with Brian Schotlander, our UL. And so we're able to, and it's a fairly informal discussion where we talk about whatever is going on in the last quarter LAUC-wise. And so there is some discussion that way. We have a direct line of communication to him. As Christella mentioned, town hall meetings, they've been pretty frequent, I'd say, in the last year. They've been trying maybe every other month to do a town hall meeting where everyone, staff and librarians, can come, and they have an agenda, but there's a lot of intercourse and back and forth. And I think that the ALs and Brian are pretty open to hearing people's concerns at that point. And